about careers in general, and then I'll be speaking a bit about something which is called the employer's market and the employee's market, and what the difference between those two is. And then we'll go on to some more practical items around your career, personal branding. How do you brand yourself as an individual? And how do you set yourself up to get good jobs, and not just individual jobs, but succeeding jobs into a long-term career. And then we'll speak about some practical stuff, some of the basic problems that you'll experience when you're looking for jobs, and also how to get great jobs, like how to work yourself into really high up, fantastic jobs. And then I'll speak a bit about self-development, and we'll have a discussion. So obviously this is meant to be a discussion, the whole thing. So just interrupt at any time and ask questions, and we can discuss them as we go along. Okay, so firstly, why should you listen to me? Like, why come out here to listen to me and speak with me? I'm not really an expert on career development per se. I'm not one of the 60-year-old people who will speak to thousands of people about careers. I'm just a friend who got too busy for university, right? So I've been studying for 5 years and basically decided that I don't have time for that anymore and I need to graduate. And that was great because now it's all done. And this is, I've only ever had four jobs after, or during uni, 3 jobs technically, and 2 careers. So during the time I've been in uni, I've gone through 2 completely separate careers. And I've only ever applied for 5 jobs in my life, and I got 5 job offers. So that means I have a 100% success rate, even if it's only a very low number. These are some pictures of where I work currently. 2, 3, you 3 have all seen my office, because you've been around for this and that. No one actually plays pool in our office. You see the pool table there? Nobody uses it. But people use the foosball table and the ping pong table, which you see in the back over there. So a very interesting thing about toys in the office, that some of them get used a lot more than others. So yeah, eWeb marketing is currently 10th best place to work in Australia. And in the past they were 2nd, so we've gone down, but that's okay, because it actually fluctuates every year, so it's not as if the place has changed much. And it's a really great place to work. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but I want to open with a question. In this picture, who seems like the smarter person? The one on the right-hand side? Why?
He's more casual.
Okay. What are the reasons? Do you guys all agree that the guy on the right-hand side looks like the smartest guy? And then, if so, why do you agree?
Smart people are not concerned about dress.
Okay. So he may appear more confident, right? He's just like, I don't really care what you think.
Yeah, I'll second that too.
I'll just wear whatever I want. I don't care what you think. Yeah? Okay. Good. Any other reasons? What do you think? By the way, I have the same shoes. Because of this picture, I bought these shoes. Yeah. This is an interesting phenomenon that's going on now in our lifetime, right? In the past, professionalism was represented by ties, shirts with collars, black pants or the suit pants, a suit jacket, nice shoes, dress shoes. That was how people perceived smart professional people to be in the past. But now we're going through a very interesting transition in our lifetimes, where the perception of what is smart is actually changing, right? So this is an illustration. I look at the right-hand side and I actually think of a lot of the lecturers here in the uni. They dress similarly to that, right? I'm not saying that all of us should go grow a beard. Shigar has one already. But the idea is to stand out and to be different and to be confident, to be different from everybody else. And I'm not saying that you should necessarily go dressed to your job interview like the guy on the right-hand side, but it's understanding the principle behind this picture and applying that into the way that you go about your career and your development. So the reason we're sitting here is because there's a transaction between employers and employees, and we want to figure out which side of that transaction we're on. So who of you have ever heard of a buyer's market and a seller's market? Have you ever heard of the difference between those two? Okay, I'll give you an illustration. Let's say we're hungry, all of us are a group of friends, we're hungry, we want to go to Macquarie shopping centre to have a bite to eat, right? We go down to the section that's the cafeteria, and we look around for something to eat. Now, in this situation, we are the ones with the absolute control, because there are so many options for us, right? There's this restaurant, there's McDonald's, Hungry Jack's, KFC, there are healthy restaurants, Asian restaurants, all sorts of restaurants. But we're the ones with the money, and we have absolute control over which one we want to go to. That's called a buyer's market. When the buyer is the one with the pants in a relationship, that's the buyer's market, okay? The buyer is the one making the decisions. The buyer is the one with lots of selection, lots of options to choose from. And the sellers, which is those shops, it's their job to try to attract, okay? A seller's market is more like, do you guys know much about H&M? Have you ever heard of H&M? No, we're all not really women's fashion people, I guess. In Macquarie Shopping Centre, downstairs, they just expanded the shopping centre, right? And there are heaps of new clothes stores. The other day I was walking around there and I noticed one clothes store in particular had a whole queue of people outside waiting to go in. And you know why they don't let them in? Because they don't want the store to be too full of people, so the people who are in the store can have a good experience in the store, right? So they line them up outside the store and they say, okay, 2 people just left, so we can admit 2 new people, but there's a certain threshold of how many people they allow in the store. Now, how many shops actually do something crazy like that, right? How many shops will keep the customers away so the other customers can have a good experience? That's a seller's market. That's when the person on the selling side of the transaction is in control of the transaction. Or in control, the one with the pants on is actually H&M, not the clients or customers. At the end of the day, we all know that H&M is getting money from those people, but they're the ones who can actually control the flow rate in. And they're in a position of power where they can do that, right? Another example is Apple. We all know that there are fanatics about Apple. And people will sit and wait a whole day in order to get an Apple iPhone that's about to come out the next day. That's a seller's market. Apple is the one in control of the transaction, even though they're the ones getting money for it. So those people have somehow built an infrastructure where they're the ones in control. Now similarly, in the job scenario, in the employment landscape, there are employee markets and employer markets. Employer markets is where the employer is in control of the transaction, kind of like H&M, which is the general trend, right? Generally, employers are the ones who are deciding who works for me, who doesn't work for me, how much I pay. They're the ones who are in control of that transaction. But there are certain areas where you can, as an employee, be the one in control of the transaction. And so the reason we're sitting here is to explain and to figure out how can we transition ourselves from being not in control to being in control. How can we be the H&M where people are lining up to give us a job and we say, no, I'll only take one job at a time, or I'll only have this job for this long. How can we get ourselves into that position? Does that sound like a good position to be in? Yeah.
Of course it does.
Of course, why don't you even ask the question? So this is really the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market. One last illustration, just to make sure the point is clear. In Sydney, currently the housing situation is a seller's market. So you know how in Eastwood they'll get an auction, and you'll see like hundreds of Chinese people come in, right? And they'll say, this house, $500,000 starting. And then they'll auction each other higher and higher and higher. And at the end of the day, who gets to make the decision about the purchase? It's the seller, the person who's selling the house. So that's a seller's market. The seller is the one with the pants on, in complete control of the transaction. And the buyers are really at the seller's mercy in a certain sense. That's what we want to achieve for our career. Sounds good now? Okay. Right. So I'm going to tell you 2 stories from LinkedIn. This just recently happened to me, and I think you'll enjoy them. I get contacted about 2 to 3 times per month with job offers on LinkedIn for various things, right? These are 2 different stories that illustrate the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market, and the understanding of people in those 2 different markets. So Laura Carr, I told you about this. I told them a little bit. She added me on LinkedIn randomly, and I was like, oh, recruiter, okay, I'll accept your request, whatever. She wrote a vague, grammatically incorrect message to me, and she said, we have a job opportunity at, she didn't even say the client, I'll explain that, but she wrote this vague message to me. She used abbreviations. She wasn't very professional in the way that she approached. And she rushed. She didn't write a personalized message to me, and she's just a consultant, right? And the attitude, and I'll tell you a bit about our conversation, but the attitude of the whole conversation was she thought she was doing me a favor by offering me a job, right? What happened is she wrote to me, and she said, I could get the conversation for you, but she wrote to me and she said, job opportunity, we're looking for someone with attention to detail, she said, and among other things. So I wrote back to her and I'm like, could you tell me which company you're hiring for? Like, what's the company that you want me to go work for? So she responded and said, it's Macquarie Leasing, but she misspelled the word Macquarie. I mean, who can misspell the word Macquarie, right? Just Google it, right? So I responded to her. I love having conversations with people on LinkedIn, if appropriate. So I responded to her and I said, hey Laura, let me just be personally frank with you. You've messaged me, you've misspelled a few words, some of your sentences are grammatically incorrect, and you misspelled the client's name in your message. And you said you're looking for someone with attention to detail. So you're not really appealing to someone with attention to detail if you don't have attention to detail yourself. And her attitude was basically, come on, if you want the job, just give me a call, blah, 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 blah. Right? So she misunderstood the scenario. She thought that it's an employer's market, that the employers are in control. Now on the left-hand side is a totally different story. Mahesh is the CEO of a company called You Refer Jobs. And the referral of him came through a friend of mine. So he contacted me through that friend, and he wrote a personalized message. He said, Shawn, good to meet you. I've looked into your profile a little bit, seen what you've been up to. You look like you'd be a great candidate for this job. He told me the company name, and he said, I'd love to have a chat with you on the phone. So I said, sure. I got on the phone with him. We had a half-an-hour chat. We chatted about recruiting, we chatted about marketing, we chatted about his opportunity, and basically he was a very, very turned-on guy. And the call was at 7 at night. So this guy's working at 7 p.m. and he's giving me a call, right? And he was just looking for a win-win situation in the recruitment process. He treated me as someone who was equal to him, that we were partners trying to find a situation that's mutually agreeable. So he understood the employees market. He knew that the best of the best already have jobs and many opportunities lining in front of them. And so he wanted to appeal to that. He actually said to me a quote that I haven't forgotten. In the beginning of the phone call, I don't know if his way of introducing himself, but he said, Shawn, it's so hard to find good talent. And the reason this stuck with me is I'm thinking I have a lot of friends who are looking for jobs, and then I have this guy on the other side of the spectrum saying, Shawn, it's so hard to find good talent. So you see there's a disconnect here. There are heaps of people unemployed looking for jobs, and then there are people on the other side here saying, I can't find talent. And there's a long disconnect here between those two spectrums, and that's because this side is that employer's market, this is the employee's market. Okay, any questions so far? Is that a good introduction?
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, good. So let's talk a bit about your career and my career. The first thing to realize is that you are your own boss in your career development. So no one's going to build your career for you. This is the most profound thing that you can come to realize about your career and your life, is that you are the master of your own life. You dictate the direction that you want to take it in. So you're in control of your destiny, and it's important to be proactive. If you think about a career just logically, we spend about 8 hours a day working, and we spend 5 days a week working. So aside from sleep, working is the thing we do most, right? So if you think about it that way, and you're probably going to work till 60, 65 years old, right? Depending, by then maybe the Australian government and economic situation will be even worse, and the retirement age will be raised again. You never know. But the point is that your career is going to go on for a long time, and it's probably the second most time-consuming thing in your life, aside from sleep. And so the question is, what kind of career do you want to build, and where do you want to take yourself? Because really, this is up to you. This is your choice. And I'll speak a bit about how to identify that, but you are the CEO of Me Incorporated. I want to speak about something called the hedgehog concept, which is about your niche. It's about where you fit in, okay? So there are three, this is from a book called Good to Great. There are three circles, and the first one is what you're deeply passionate about. The second is what you are the best in the world at. And the third is what drives your economic engine. So if you want to build yourself a great career, one of the first things you have to figure out is, what is my niche right now? Where do I want to go right now? It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be your niche forever. But for the moment, for this period of time that I'm in right now, what do I want to do for a job? What can I do for a job that I actually love doing so that Monday morning comes by and it's not a problem, I'm really happy to go to work? So the first thing to ask yourself is, what are you deeply passionate about? If you're not passionate about what you do, then it will show. It will show to your employer, it will show to the clients that you work with. It actually shows because you don't put the extra effort in. And you don't show that love, that care factor for your work. So what are you deeply passionate about? Then the next question is, what can you be the best in the world at? So that sounds really difficult. How can you be the best in the world at something? And the answer to that is to make it a bit more specific. So this comes from a book, and in the book there was a bank in America, and they were trying to figure out where they fit into the world, the whole bank, right? And what they figured out is they could be the best bank at home loans in the Western United States. So that's a very specific niche. Best bank, home loans, Western United States. So for what you are the best in the world at, it doesn't have to be you're the best computer engineer in the world. It can be, I am the best computer engineer in this region of Sydney that can speak this language and that has a specialty in this area. So a combination of skills that fits together and benefits you. So I'll tell you what mine is right now. For me, I believe that I am the best in the world at a search engine optimizer who has a deeply technical background of computer engineering, who has a client-facing propensity, ability to speak and communicate closely with clients, and speaks Mandarin Chinese. So that's a very, very specific combination of skill sets, and I can claim that I'm probably the best in the world at that in Sydney, right? Because it's in this niche. And so by doing that, I've figured out where I fit into the world for the moment. So that fulfills this section of the circle. So the question is, what can you be the best in the world at, and what is that? It doesn't have to be a very broad thing, it can be highly specific. And I recently had an opportunity to work with a client to translate their website into Chinese from English. And we had to translate the URLs of the website and the meta information. As that's a very technical task. You have to understand how search engines work, but I had to speak Chinese as well, and I had to be able to communicate with clients. So that opportunity to do that work would have come to no one else except for me, because I had the exact skill set that task needed. And then finally, if you're passionate about something and you're really good at it, then it's useless if it doesn't drive your economic engine. You have to be able to make money from that as well. So, it's great if you're a good ice skater, but if you're not good enough to make money, then you may have to switch across to something else. And so in this section here, this region over here, this is where hobbies tend to sit, people who are very good at a hobby. But the difference between a hobby and a really good niche is that you can make money from it. So when you can't make money from something and you know that in your heart you're not going to make money from it, then you might want to try find a different niche that really connects those three circles. And finally, the point I have there about just playing is, again, you want to find something that feels like playing for you. Every day you're playing at work, you're having a great time. Right? Any questions about this?
A couple.
Yeah?
Like, isn't it very difficult to find out what's combinedly common? It's very difficult, I think.
You mean the common area of those three? Yeah. So I don't present this lightly as if it's some kind of 5-minute job. You just walk out in the rain for 5 minutes.
It's like
got it.
More than 90% people won't find it.
Correct. So that's why it's a matter of deep introspection. You need to think deeply and carefully about yourself for a long time to find that.
I'm just interested in knowing how long did it take you to sort of develop that niche and sort of finding your position? How long did it take you?
I mean, the first step in developing this understanding is knowing what it is, right? So, is this the first time you guys have encountered this diagram?
I did before.
You did before, okay. Yeah, we chatted about it before. So the first time I encountered this was like 7 years ago or something. So it didn't take me 7 years to find this niche. What I mean is I always was approaching life with this understanding, career specifically, with this understanding for 7 years. So it's easier to find it if you have that in the back of your mind the whole time. Yeah. But I mean, my current one, sometimes you don't feel what that is, you feel what it's not. So sometimes you're in a job and all you know is you're not in there. And then you want to try to take one step closer to what that is.
From my personal experience, because I've talked with different people from different backgrounds, that is, I haven't found anyone except you who is in that union. So it's very difficult.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard. To be honest, for most people, work is just work.
Yeah, they just work and they don't like it. They
Yeah.
work because they want to get that money.
Yeah.
That's it.
And then the question is, that's actually okay. I'm not like condemning that behavior. That's okay for other people, but it's not what I want. So the question is that what you want? Do you want to work just because you need money? There's nothing wrong with that, but just understand that you may never reach the level of happiness that you would if you work for something deeper, something that resonates deeply with you, like this. So yeah, very good question. I think there are very few people who reach an understanding of this, but when you hit it, it's like a gold mine, because you're happy to go to work, you love your work, you really derive a lot of happiness from work, and you get paid for it as well. This is a great thing to do. Yeah. Any other questions? Good comments, by the way. Good comments. This isn't. This is kind of like one of the many models of thinking about your career, and I subscribe to this one a lot. So I'm going to speak a bit about value. How many of you commonly hear the phrase "add value"? Yeah. Okay. If you're in the working place, you'll hear the phrase "add value" a lot. It's a very, very common phrase, right? Something needs to add value. I love this cartoon from Dilbert, where Dilbert is the programmer, and that's his boss. He says, this is the part where you pretend to add value. So it's just a very cold, funny way of saying that not everybody in a company adds value to their company. So what is value? The thing is, most of us come from a technical background, doing engineering. But in reality, work is a lot more about interpersonal relationships. And so technical understanding is very important, but having a great job and having a great career has a lot more to do with understanding people and what makes people tick really well. And so the point of adding this slide is, one of the greatest hacks of your career is figuring out what will your employer see value in. What is it that you can do that your employer feels is very, very valuable to them? And as soon as you can provide that, then you're starting to make that switch to the employees market. Because you know how to add value. In fact, you know how to add immense value, a lot more than perhaps the other people in the company. And then the power comes over to you, because you're the one adding the most value. So as I wrote there, all employees and employers are engaged in a monetary exchange, but the value offered by employees varies greatly. So the amount of value that each different employee adds is quite different. The ones that add the most value are the ones who are generally in control. So job security, back to this bottom simple kind of equation, value is job security, and it is the same concept as an employee's market. If you just know how to add value, then you'll have great job security. Actually, recently at my work, they laid off 2 people, right? So I know that they are laying off people. They're laying them off because they weren't adding enough value to the company, and they're costing the company money. But I wasn't scared at all that they would lay me off, because I feel I add value. And even if they did lay me off, that's fine. I'll go find another job. So that if you can hack that, if you can understand that, what adds value to an organization, then you're really in the right area. Okay, any questions about value? It's a very subjective thing. And sometimes it changes. Let's say you have a boss before, and you get a new boss. Then, even if you had a great relationship with the old boss, and you added a lot of value, you still have to figure out with the new boss what adds value to him, what he sees value in. Recently, a story from my experience recently, we had a client who we were doing certain work for. And then the person who was our point of contact in the client side, she went on maternity leave because she was about to have a baby. And a new person came in and started working there. And we went to the first meeting and we said, we're doing this, this, and this. And she's like, I don't want any of this. I don't see any value in this. What she says is, I want to see how we are positioned in regards to our competitors. So we were doing some kind of writing content for her website, that kind of stuff. And she wanted something completely different. She wanted consulting on how her competitors are doing online marketing. And so we had to totally change the strategy across to what that point of contact saw value in. And once we switched that, and it took us a little bit to get this wasn't immediate. We had to have a couple of phone calls to click across. Once we established that, and we went to her and we had a meeting and we said, okay, we've done some analysis here of what your competitors are doing online. She was over the moon. She was really happy. But I know for a fact if we had given that same analysis to the previous person, they wouldn't have seen any value in it. So it's very subjective. What is valuable to the person that you're working for? Very subjective. But that's part of the hack of life. That's part of understanding and adding value to an organization. Okay, let's talk about personal branding. So there are no questions so far, right? Yeah. Okay, who can tell me what personal branding is? From your own thoughts, your own definition.
Marketing yourself.
Marketing yourself. Good. Yeah. Good. Good definition. Yeah?
I would just say what you're known
What you're known for. Yeah, very good. So the definition I had is very similar to both of those. It's personal branding is when somebody mentions your name and you're not there, what does everybody else think? What's the first impression that comes to their mind? Do they think, oh, really solid guy, really reliable, really smart? Or do they think, oh, he was late for that meeting once? Or, what comes to their mind? That's personal branding. And it's not easy to achieve, but it's very, very worthwhile. It pays back. So companies understand the concept of branding extremely well. When you go watch a football game, you'll see Coca-Cola on the side there. They're sponsoring the event. The reason they pay so much money just to get that logo there is so they can be on top of people's mind. So branding is about getting yourself on top of mind and making people think well of you. And that's part of marketing. And it's the very human part of career development. And I'll speak a bit about some of the ways you can brand yourself here. So first of all, there were some questions about resumes before. I'm going to give you a quote from a book that I recently read, Seth Godin. He says, this is controversial, but here goes. If you're remarkable, amazing, or just plain spectacular, you probably shouldn't have a resume at all. Right, so that's very controversial, right? But that's great, I love that, okay. It's extreme, that's a very extreme statement, but I think it's very visionary. I think that, this is just my personal view, a resume is a good way to be one of many. Just like you go to that shop, and all of those restaurants, they're one of many. You have many to choose from. And the thing is, when you rely heavily on resumes, then basically you're sticking yourself in a pile of other people. So my suggestion is to find a way to brand yourself that doesn't involve resumes just being sent out at random to employers. I just don't think it's that effective anymore. Again, this is a personal opinion, but I think the future, we'll see things leading to more like LinkedIn, which I'll speak about in a minute. So, however, resumes are still a language that people use, and it's still something that employers ask for. So here are some useful tips about building a resume. The first thing is, if you have a job that you want to apply for, always tailor your resume to the job. Always. So don't just send them a generic resume that has your experience, and so on. And this relates back to adding value. So what you need to try to do before you send your resume is think, what will this employer see value in? What are they looking for at this current period in time? And how can I pitch my skills in a certain way that is more appealing to that customer, to that employer? So show the parts of the skills that you know your employer is looking for, and devalue or demote irrelevant experience. So we all have a certain amount of stuff we can put on a resume. The question is, how do you prioritize that stuff, put the most relevant and whatever that you think they'll see most value in at the top, and expand it, write more about it, give more details. And then if you have experience that's irrelevant, shove it a little bit closer down to the bottom. And then you'll be closer to delivering that value. Another thing is, say something unique and different. So this is something we've seen in so many resumes, right? Anyone can say a driven, resourceful individual with heaps of experience, blah, blah, blah. Everybody says that on their resume, right? The question is, can you do something different and unique? And one suggestion I have for that is try to showcase real work, not just the history and not just words that explain about yourself. So real work, real life projects that you've worked on, that's one of the greatest ways to show value. It's like, hey, I'm not just going to talk about myself, here's my work. Take a look at the work and judge for yourself. So this is one of the greatest ways to go about writing a resume. Any questions about that? Yeah. So in my place, I've been involved in some of the recruiting in e-web marketing. Resumes, by the time we get a resume, we're usually already set on whether or not we want that person. Sometimes we get them before interviews. Most of the time we interview the person first. So we just say, hey, I want to have a chat with you, see what you're like. And then from that interview, we've made more or less a decision. And the resume just confirms whether or not that's the right thing to do. They're not as important, I believe, as things like interviews, which I'll speak about in a second. LinkedIn, however, is very important. So I think LinkedIn is the new resume. It's dynamic. You can change it in real time, and it's always up to date. You can link to people, and you can share things, like on Facebook, you can actually share what you're up to, share your content. I think LinkedIn is one of the perfect places for personal branding. I'd really suggest spend a lot of time in your profile and write it very, very carefully. Think about what people will look for, and think about which types of people you want to appeal to, and appeal to those people. Pitch your LinkedIn profile to them. It's really the perfect professional networking tool. So when I was doing ISIS 360, I don't remember the teacher's name, she basically stood up and said, if you're not on LinkedIn, then you should get on LinkedIn and get off Facebook, pretty much. If you're serious about your career, LinkedIn is the way. When we go see clients, we'll always look up their LinkedIn profiles before. We'll see who we're dealing with, see what their experience is. So recently, I'll tell you a story. Recently, Macquarie Uni is actually one of my clients, the Faculty of Business and Economics. I help them with their internet marketing and search engine optimization. And I had a meeting with their faculty leader of marketing, and then the university has a higher organization that is doing the marketing and the revamp of all of the Macquarie University websites right now. That's ongoing. And they invited several people to the meeting, and I really, really wanted this meeting to succeed. So what I did is I went and looked up every single person on LinkedIn beforehand. And I looked up what has this person done, what are they interested in, what's their specialty, and so on. And so to give an example of how I used that knowledge, I noticed that one of the guys who was responsible for user experience, he happened to learn a bit of Mandarin Chinese. So when I met with him, when we're having a casual chat, I said, hey, I checked out your LinkedIn, I see you're learning Mandarin, what's that like? And he explained, he's learning a bit, his girlfriend is Chinese, whatever. And by doing that kind of interaction, you can immediately build a human relationship with someone. And that human relationship shows value to that person. It shows that you care about them. And that's especially important in personal branding. So I actually sent him to my course that I have on Mandarin Chinese, and I think he's taking that now. So it's very, very important. Use LinkedIn as a tool. And in order to search other people's profiles, you have to have a good profile yourself. To begin with, right? Do you guys want me to do a demonstration afterwards to show some areas to look out for in LinkedIn? Yeah. Actually, I'll do that now anyway, since we're on the topic. Now, if you go Google it and you just search like how to optimize LinkedIn, you'll find heaps of good articles about it. So I won't spend too much time on it, but I'll show you some basic stuff. The first thing is, And my profile isn't perfect. I should probably add a background here, but I'm not really bothered about that. The first thing is, when you write your profile, this text up here is searchable. So when people go up to this bar and they search for stuff, what will rank there is this text. So basically say what you are, even if you're not that thing yet. Say what you want to be. So say, like, I'm a telecommunications engineer. Well, you have a formal qualification in that area, right? For example, you may not have practice yet in that field, but you should write there, I'm a telecommunications engineer, because that's what you are formally. And so when people are searching for that, they'll find you and they'll bump into you. They'll be more likely to connect with you and offer you jobs and so on. What's also important, this summary, my only suggestion is make it practical, make it you, make it real life, but professional, I've seen some people who basically, I don't know, there are different opinions about how you should write on this. Some people say you should write in the third person. So, Shawn is a driven individual who does blah, blah, blah. But I like to write as if it's me. So I wrote there, I work every day to make the world a better place online. And then I wrote a little bit of an explanation about what I do. Of course, put in all of your previous job experience and be thorough in terms of what the job's involved. And get people to recommend you, which is what I need to do a bit more of right now. Coming down to this section here, skills. So, you know this because we've been recently at our work, we were discussing this, and basically the thing is, people will search by skill on the search bar up here. So if you have a skill and if you have it endorsed by other people, then you'll tend to rank higher there, and they'll find you for that. So I actually recently switched mine around because I used to have a lot of IT-related skills, which was my previous role, and I switched it to a more online marketing skill set, and people have started to endorse me on that. Now, understand that people will take this with a grain of salt. One time, do you guys know what Citrix is? Have you heard of Citrix?
I see.
It's a platform.
No.
It's a platform that you can use for certain remote connections on computers and so on. I don't actually know much about Citrix, but back in the day, somehow Citrix got into my skills on LinkedIn, right? I don't know how. And all of a sudden, heaps of people endorsed me for Citrix. And I had Citrix right at the top there, like 64 endorsements or something. And I'm like, I don't even know the first thing about Citrix. I don't know anything about it. So just bear in mind that smart recruiters will understand that these kinds of things can be spammed. People can just go blast out to their friends, hey, endorse me for everything. And I've had lots of experience with people I'm connected to endorsing me for something that I know I can't do, like Citrix and other things. So people have endorsed me, I know they don't know that I can't do this, and I know they know nothing about my skills. So just be wary on that one. Education, interests, and so on. Just basically make it a really good profile about yourself, because this is your public face, really. This is how people will judge you. And LinkedIn is just a great way to get connections that are actually offering you jobs. Okay, networking. I don't want you to be distracted by the slide, so I'm going to talk about networking a bit. We all know that network is important for jobs, but what I'm going to speak about first is a very, very important principle about networking. If you approach networking with the attitude that I'm looking to build big buddies in big places, then it's not going to work out as well for you. What you should approach, the attitude you should approach networking with is, I'm making professional friends. So think of it more like a friend building exercise in a professional area. So that's the first point I have here, is there's a thought leader in my space in online marketing called Rand Fishkin, and he was talking about networking. He says, make friends, not networking connections. So the main idea is that you shouldn't approach it with, I'm just trying to connect with someone because I want them to do something, but because you want to make a friend in a professional sphere. So go to events. I mean, here are some practical tips, really. Go to events, meet people, and step out of your comfort zone. Make friends with peers, not just people above you. So something that would sometimes happen is, let's say I'm at a networking event, and here's Jeff, right? And I go introduce myself to Jeff. I'm like, hey Jeff, how are you? What do you do? And he's, I'm a junior digital marketing specialist. And then I'm like, oh. And then there's a little thing ticking in my mind. I'm like, he's below me. And then I'm like, good to meet you. Bye. But you shouldn't approach networking with that attitude, right? Because if you approach it with that attitude, it's not sincere. What you should approach is, hey, this is Jeff. He's also a working professional. He does a good job. He's a high integrity person. And I'm not connecting with him for my benefit. I'm connecting with him for mutual benefit, so that we can be friends, right? And that's an important attitude to have. Because if you go about networking and you're just always thinking about yourself and what you can gain from networking, then people will see that selfish approach is a bit distasteful. So networks have also built over time. They're not immediate. It takes you years to build a really good network, so be patient about it. And here's a very important point: make deposits, not withdrawals. Do any of you know what I mean by that? Can you guess what I mean by make deposits, not withdrawals?
Keeping in contact, just delete after like a couple of conversations, something like that.
Yeah, that's good, yeah. What I'm referring to specifically here is the value transaction. So when you meet someone, try to add value to their life instead of finding ways for them to add value to your life, right? So when you meet someone, let's say I meet Jeff, and let's say I'm a senior digital marketing specialist, he's a junior digital marketing specialist. Even though technically, if you care about hierarchy, he's below, hey T, even though technically if you care about hierarchy, you could say he's below me, what I should do is think, how can I add value to Jeff's life through our friendship as professionals together? And so even with people below you, with people above you, you should be a positive energy source instead of trying to suck in energy. Try to make deposits in their lives. Try to add value to them somehow and help them. All right. Does that make sense? Yeah. I also want to talk about, hey T,
What kind of values?
you'll have to watch the video. I'll reiterate briefly what part of building a successful career is figuring out what people see value in. Right? Figuring out what is valuable to another individual and helping them to achieve that thing. So let's say, a good example, let's say I have a new blog that I'm starting up and I am hoping that this blog can get bigger. One way you can add value to me, if you heard that, you somehow got that information, one way you can add value to me is to share my blog on your social networks. You got it? That's a free thing. It's very easy for you to do, but it's meaningful to me. It means something in my heart, right? And so when you're building networks and you're connecting with people around, try to find, hey, what is valuable to this person and how can I add value to their lives? And then, if necessary, you can ask them for favors later on. But first try to make deposits, and then later on you may be able to make withdrawals if you need them. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to speak about weak ties for a second, right? So I'm friends with all of you except for you, right? So we're a weak tie, okay? Here's a quote by someone called Meg J. She says, this is a talk about people between the ages of 20 and 30 and employment, right? She says, new things come from what are called our weak ties, our friends of friends of friends. So yes, half of 20-somethings are or underemployed, but half aren't. And weak ties are how you get yourself into that group. Half of new jobs are never posted. So reaching out to your neighbor's boss is how you can get that unposted job. It's not cheating, it's the science of how information spreads. So this part of networking, let's say you're that individual in the center of that network. Your friends are great, right? But the ties that you want to nourish are the next level out from your friends. They are called your weak ties. Friends of friends or friends of friends of friends. If you can build relationships with them, try to add value to them, but not in an overboard way. Just try to do something for them. For example, this evening we're having this meeting and I'm giving a free presentation to you, right? That's my effort to try to add some value to your lives. And it's a great way to connect with people. And again, it's not out of your own interest because you want something, it's just because you want to add value to the lives of those around you. And employers see that tendency. Okay, thought leadership. All right. This is a very important area, and I think it's really the future and present of self-branding. So we talked a bit earlier about finding your niche and finding where you are an expert and where you're passionate. And the next point is, how do you establish yourself as a thought leader in that field? So this is really, I guess, going to the next level, but to trace back to the beginning of this whole presentation, we're looking for ways to make an employee market, not an employer market. And in order to get to that level, we have to become thought leaders in our space. So a thought leader is someone who is so expert in that area that they are the ones teaching other people and sharing knowledge for free with everybody else. So thought leadership is about showing that you're an expert. And this really is in the region between employee market and employer market. It separates cogs from artists. So I want to speak about that for a second. You all know what a cog is, right? You have a big mechanical device, and it has those cogs that connect with each other and they turn, right? And they turn each other. What happens if one of those cogs breaks? No big deal. There are another 1,000 cogs that are all the same size, same specification. We'll take the broken one out and we'll stick the new one in, okay? Now, I'm using this as an analogy to human resources, because if you go to, say, the factory, if you go to a factory and you look at factory workers, they are cogs. They're easily replaceable. If one factory worker gets fed up with his job and he leaves, we say, no problem, we'll just get another guy off the street, we'll put him through an hour-long induction, and he'll be the next factory worker. No problem, right? But if you want to make the transition to an employee market, you have to be indispensable. You have to be more like an artist. You have to be more connected to human relationships and how to nourish those. And as a thought leader, you become a lot more indispensable. Because then you see someone, I want to give an example here. Lecturers, we've all seen good lecturers in this uni, really good lecturers. No, you haven't. I've seen a couple of really good lecturers in the uni, right? Mike Johnson, you know him, he's one I talk about a lot, right? If he left, you can't just replace the guy, right? You can't just put out an ad and say, we want another Mike Johnson. Because he was so different. He was so good at connecting with students. He was so good at education. He was more of an artist, right? And that's what you want to be. You want to be more of an artist, less of a cog. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So going back to LinkedIn, and again, we're on the topic of personal branding. If someone Googles your name, what do you want them to see? And that's something that employers do nowadays. They'll hear your name and they'll go Google it, and they can find stuff about you, and they can use that stuff to judge you in a positive or negative way. So I've obviously optimized my presence online. If you have a common name, it's like if your name is John Smith, then it's a little bit easier to get away with not branding yourself online, because there are so many other John Smiths out there that it's hard to distinguish, right? But I have a unique name, Shawn Powrie. No one else in the world has the same name, so if someone Googles that, I want to make sure that what they see is what I want them to see. So first I have my LinkedIn profile, and second I have my blog. And then third, interestingly, this result has now come up because I commented on this guy's blog. And this is an example of what I want to show to you guys about being clever, being smart about your online presence. So this is Rand, and he wrote an article about depression and how his depression is fading. He's a thought leader in the online marketing space. He's a very, very switched on guy. And basically I wrote a comment on this article. Sorry, the comments haven't loaded. Or he deleted the comment. That would be pretty helpful as well.
No, I think load more comments. It's underneath. It's not.
Was
on
it at the
page.
bottom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, there we go.
Because it's not on the page.
Yeah.
No, try.
Basically what happened is Google crawled this page, and because this website is high authority, this is a bit about SEO, it's because even if it just has my name in there, it's now ranked at really high. Interesting, very interesting. There we go. Rand, I have an immense respect and admiration for you and your quintessential personification of the concept of transparency. So that's great. Now if someone sees that, they'll think I'm smart. Because I use big words. So the idea is, the reason I bring this up is YouTube videos. If you have a name on Google+, that's just your name, and you comment on YouTube videos, and if you're part of the, I don't think you guys are, but if you're part of the group of people in the world who are passive, aggressive kind of people, who tend to write like, screw you, and you suck, and that kind of stuff on YouTube videos, and you realize that employers can find that stuff. If they Google your name and they search through page 1 and 2 and they go to every link, it's not hard to find comments on YouTube videos. So just be careful about what you say and write online in the public sphere, because employers can find really interesting, funny stuff. So that's part of the effort of personal branding nowadays. Yeah?
What happens if I have done these things already? How do I remove it? Because there is a lot of information I have already used.
Go find it, delete it.
I
Google it yourself, find it.
there is a couple of Facebook ID I had before that I'm not totally using it.
I don't think they can see
their
Facebook
password or
comments.
anything.
Oh, Facebook is private.
That's private, that's not public. YouTube is public.
YouTube is public, Facebook is private.
Blogs are public.
If the settings are set to private, Facebook. It depends on your privacy settings on those accounts, but it should default to private. So if you don't change it from the default, you shouldn't have a problem with those old accounts. Yeah. But yeah, that's part of branding in the modern sphere is thinking, what do you want people to see when they Google your name? And this can change. I can tell you a bit about SEO, but in general, this is pretty much what I want people to see. Some of it has a little bit of the funny stuff and the more humorous side of me. Some of it has the professional side, all of that. You want people to see that. Good. All right. Any questions about that? Right. Talking about online presence optimization could be a whole nother topic, but a very simple way to do it is just build a good LinkedIn profile, because LinkedIn tends to rank very highly when you're searching for people's names.
Do they actually use it? Do employers actually use LinkedIn?
Yes, yeah, I just gave a whole spiel about LinkedIn, but I mean, I can just tell you, for me personally, I don't even have to give you stats, I get 2 to 3 job offers a month on LinkedIn at the moment. So it's, I mean, not contract, but contact, where someone speaks to me and says, I have a job opportunity, I think you'd be good for it. So yeah, definitely go into LinkedIn. If you're serious about your career, build a good LinkedIn profile. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to speak about a bit of some practical stuff. Everyone still good to keep going? Yeah. All right. The first job problem. So here's a quote from someone called Sabrina. She's a friend of mine who used to work at KPMG. You all know what KPMG is. Yeah? She says, when we're faced with fresh graduates, we check their resume. If they haven't been working while studying, we pretty much ask them, what have you been doing the whole time? So this is the world that we live in. Is if you want a higher tier job, then just studying is not good enough anymore. Those higher tier jobs are expecting you to work and study at the same time. And not everyone expects that, of course, but higher tier jobs, they see that as something important. And so I use this as an illustration of what's called the first job problem. Usually the hardest job to find is your first one. Because if you're currently employed, then you're a lot more attractive to employers. Going back to my earlier points about the employee versus employer markets, when you're in the employee market, you're usually already taken. And so what you're looking for is the next hop up. And those higher tier employers, they're just looking to poach people from the lower tiers who are already employed. So really getting your first job is probably the hardest job to get. So how many of you haven't worked full-time yet? Most, but not all. Yeah. You've worked full-time, yeah? At CSIRO, right? No, at other places.
Back home.
Yeah. Make sure to
Experience?
Work experience, yeah. Work experience counts as well. Yeah?
Army counts?
Army, yeah.
It's compulsory though.
Yeah. The reason I bring this up is, I guess I'm a bit compassionate for people who are still trying to find their first jobs, because it's the hardest one to find. Once you've had your first job and you're in it, then hopping to the next level is a lot easier. Because let's say, I'll tell you about I was in my second IT job, and I was like, okay, I want to change my career, I want to go into online marketing, I'm bored of IT or whatever. I was already working full-time. So when I came to my employer and I said, hey, I'm working full-time already, I already have a secure job, but I want to take my career to the next level. That's a lot more attractive to an employer than, hey, I have no job, please help me. You know what I'm saying? So the pitch is completely different. But you can still find it. Again, nourish your weak ties and brand yourself, all that other stuff. For great jobs, I want to talk about great jobs. How many of you aspire to work at a place like Google one day? Yeah? Me? Pick me. Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about when I say higher tier job or great job. These kinds of jobs have hundreds of people applying for them. So you have to find a way to distinguish yourself in applying for jobs. How's the battery doing? Okay?
I think it's doing fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So great jobs have lots of people applying. You have to find a way to distinguish yourself. The explanation I have here is treat them more like a marriage, less like a one-night stand. Okay? So often when we look for jobs, we're like, okay, hey, here's my resume. Do you like me? Yes, no, take me. Right? Hey, I met you and this is crazy. Here's my resume, take me maybe. Right? So it's different for great jobs. There's a much slower approach that I found. That's how I got my job. It's a lot more effective. So here are some suggestions if you want to go for a higher tier job. Just my opinion, right? Firstly, meet people in the organization and attend public events. Most huge companies will have public events. So for example, the CSIRO, you may think that's something to aspire to, right? They probably have public events. They probably have seminars. They probably have all sorts of things. And the reason you go to those is to hack what is valuable to this company. What are the problems that this company is facing and how can I try to help solve those problems? So attend those public events and make friends, professional friends, in those events and have LinkedIn conversations. Meet someone at an event, add them in LinkedIn, and try to come up with something of substance to say to them, but make it concise. So let's say I met Tianosa, he's the managing director at CSIRO or something like that, right? I met him, I had a brief conversation with him, he's a busy man, we met at an event. I'll add him in LinkedIn, and I'll think about what did we talk about in our conversation. Tianosa said one of the greatest challenges CSIRO faces is lack of funding. Let's say that, okay? I assume that's probably true. Yeah, lack of funding, okay? So I'm thinking about, after our conversation, I walk away and I'm thinking about this guy, and I'm thinking about CSR, I'm thinking about the problems that they're facing. I'm thinking, how can I add value to that, right? And I'm not saying that you'll necessarily run into someone so high as the managing director, but you'll probably run into lower tier people who will say the same thing. And then you could think about that for a while, and then you write to him on LinkedIn and say, hey, Tianosi, remember our conversation earlier that was really good, and by the way, I suggest keep a little bit of a pause between contact. Don't contact him the evening you meet him, right? Keep him in mind and come back 2 weeks later or something and write to him. Say, hey, Tianosi, I remember our conversation. It gives you the illusion that you're busy, right? It makes them think that you're busy. And that's a great thing to make people think. Hey, Tianosi, I remember our conversation. I was thinking about your problem with funding. And I remembered that large, complex organizations often waste a lot of money on things. And I was wondering, from your experience, what are some of the things that waste a lot of money in CSIRO? The reason I ask is, I have a similar company or something like that. And so what you're doing is you're kind of appealing to the person. You're saying, hey, I think you're an expert, what do you think of XYZ? Or on the other side, give a smart suggestion. Think through the problem, go research it, and give a smart suggestion. That's a great way to show value to companies. Come back with a clever suggestion to them that they may not have thought of before, and that can really put yourself in a high position, right? Again, try to show as much value as possible to them. And wherever you go, try to show value to people. Volunteer to do basic work for them for free. This is not hard to do. Try to, a lot of internships are not even publicized that someone wants an internship. You can approach someone in a company and say, hey, I noticed that you're working on these wireless adapters or whatever it is, and I have 3 days off next week. Is there anything I can help you with for free for 3 days? And then you go in there and you show immense value. You do a smart job, you ask good questions, all that stuff. And then that's a way to put yourself in front of those great employers. And then they'll really appreciate that. So again, you can arrange your own internships. Try to research their problems, as I said here, and discuss possible solutions with them. And always do your homework. Know the people in the company and know them well. Go research them online, see what their preferences are, their personalities, and so on. Any questions about this? Yeah, good. Okay, interviews, right? So the first point I want to make about interviews is that when you approach an interview, you need to have an attitude of, this is an awesome opportunity, because this person's going to judge me from only half an hour of contact. So this person's going to judge your entire life and your entire personality, your entire skill set for just half an hour of contact with you. So if you can have a good half an hour of your life, if you drink coffee, I don't drink coffee, but if you drink coffee, go have a good coffee before that, or whatever will make you, at your best performance, because they're going to judge you in half an hour. What a great opportunity. So I don't know how many of you like exams. I like exams. The reason is the same, right? You're going to judge my performance of this whole subject in just 3 hours, right? So if I do a good job in 3 hours, I'll get good marks, and that's so easy to do, right? So interviews are like that.
No, she doesn't like it.
Interviews are like that. They're an awesome opportunity, and you can make somebody be impressed with you in a very short amount of time. So my other point here about interviews is never be late. Never be late. I'm not even going to talk about if you're late, do blah, blah, blah. Just don't be late, right? And I'll tell you a story. I went for an interview at one of my previous job opportunities. I got the opportunity, but I didn't take it. And I went an hour early because I just wanted to be early. And the thing is, you don't know how long it's going to take you to get there. You've never been to the place, all of that. So I parked my car and I found the address, and I was like, okay, I'm an hour early. Well, I'm going to walk up to the reception and I'm going to make sure that I'm at the right place. And I'm going to tell them I'm here and I'm going for a walk and I'll be back in time for the interview, right? So I walked up, and guess what? The company wasn't there. The company had moved, and the signature on their emails was their old address. So I frantically called them up, and I'm like, shucks, I'm here at your address, but you're not here. And they said, oh, we've moved to this place. Luckily, it wasn't too far away, but it still took me another half an hour to find their office. So imagine I had come just on time, and I'd gone up to the office and it wasn't there, then I would have been late for the interview. Doesn't matter if it's their fault because the signature was off. Because I'm a proactive person, I have to take the necessary steps to be there on time, no matter what. So that's why I suggest to build a huge buffer into your time. On the day that you're at the interview, build a buffer of about an hour. Just make sure you're on time no matter what. Now that kind of extreme scenario won't happen all the time, but it's important, right? So one other thing about interviews is don't come in there empty-handed in terms of thoughts and ideas. Walk into an interview with some questions and some thoughts that you want to ask based on the homework that you've done about the company. So don't just walk in there and say, hi, I'm Shawn, and then wait for the other person to ask you questions and to engage with you. You can walk in there and say, hi, I'm Shawn, I've looked up your company, I'm really interested in this, and this that you're doing. Hey, how about this? I'm curious, how did you achieve that? Start natural conversations, right? And in fact, I'll add this here, if you can even drive the interview yourself. So I've gotten an opportunity recently to interview with a guy who I may one day work for, right? And that's to do with weak ties that I mentioned earlier. So I have a coffee set up with this guy, and when I walk into the coffee meeting with him, I'm just going to drive it myself. I'm going to say, hey, this is the picture of my ideal career and where I want to take it. Is that a win-win situation with where your company is going? And we're going to establish early on, is that the direction that he wants to go? So in that case, I'm driving the interview, and I'm driving the process. And that's a great way to, again, going back to the employee market, great way to be in the employee market is you drive the interviews yourself. You're the one driving the whole interaction. So when I started working at eWeb, I walked in there and I said, I have no experience with SEO, but I'm really interested in SEO and learning SEO, and I want to work for you guys as a professional SEO practitioner person. And then I said to him, can you send me some training material that I'll read in the next month? We have another interview in a month's time, and I'll come back and I'll give you a presentation on everything I've learned. And then you can tell me if I'm on the right track to work at a place like this. In that sense, I was driving the whole interaction. I was saying, this is where I want to go, is that where you want to go? And then meeting those two together. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any questions about interviews? Good. By the way, speaking about resumes, people don't tend to read the whole thing anyway. So really interviews, they're probably a much better opportunity to impress someone than resumes. Because, resumes are usually very text heavy and they're long. And in my experience, and we've done recruiting, people don't read through the whole thing. They read through the first 2 paragraphs or something and they're like, nah, bored with this one. Yeah. Okay, self-development. This is, I think, the final topic. So you guys have done well. A crucial part of a modern career is self-development. Especially if you want to go into that higher tier of employee market thinking, then you have to develop yourself continually. Here are some tips to do that. The first one is books. So this is a quote, I can't find the source. The most successful people are also avid readers. So how many of you read because you want to? Hey, one person. Yeah. So most of the time from uni we get into the habit of we only read because there's a subject that requires us to read a certain textbook, and usually it's a very boring, dry textbook. And I have good news for you, not all books in the world are boring and dry, and most of them are a lot more valuable than the textbooks we'd read here at uni. And I have a list if you want.
I don't even read textbooks.
Yeah, nobody really does. So, this is the habit, a good habit to get into. Read because you want to, and you want to self-develop, not because you needed to for a particular purpose. So yeah, I have a good readings list if you want, but they're all about self-development and becoming excellent and raising your standards and being proactive, that kind of thing. Upskilling. So in the modern career, you definitely need to continually upskill. That doesn't mean you have to take a bachelor's degree after bachelor's degree all the time. Upskilling just means things like going to conferences, going and doing your own research on a certain topic, going and learning about something you're passionate about, going and doing a personal experiment in something, and then using all of this to upskill yourself. And we definitely live in that age of perpetual learning. Never stop upskilling. So, are you guys still good? Can I keep talking, or is everyone getting bored?
No.
Yeah? Okay. I had a conversation recently with a guy who owned his own investment firm in America. He happens to be, he's a weak tie. My wife, she used to work here in Sydney, and he was her boss. And so he was visiting back from America, and we had dinner together. And he's in his 60s, he's a very experienced guy, he's owned a couple of companies. And I wanted to ask him about his career. I want to say, what do you do in your career? How have you developed it? And he said, my career has been a series of benign betrayals. So I said, what do you mean by that phrase, benign betrayal? And he explained. So firstly, benign, that's an adjective, it means harmless. Okay? Betrayal, we all know what betrayal means. What he said is, I would go to a job and I would add as much value as I could. I would give them everything and add huge value to this job. But as soon as I feel like I've learned everything I can from that job, I would leave. And I would betray them. And when he says betrayal, he means that employers, even though they're people have a tendency of abusing your sense of loyalty. That's just how employers are. So they try to build loyalty in the ranks of employees, but it's just human nature, they will abuse it. The simple example of that is if you work in an agency like I do, you will realize one day that you earn a lot more money for the agency than the agency pays you. That's how companies work. Kind of like a teacher here at Macquarie Uni could sit down here with a class full of students, and if they just think it through, they'll realize that these students are paying a lot more money for this hour of lecture than they're getting paid for that hour of lecture, right? And so sooner or later, you have to realize that if you hit a roof, if you've garnered all of the knowledge you can from a certain job, then you may be at the point where you need to leave. And that's why it's benign betrayal. It's harmless, it's just business, that's the way life is. So sooner or later, you'll leave whatever job you're in, because you've hit a roof, you're not learning anymore, and if you want to be in that employees market, you need to be continually learning, which means switching up to the next level, okay? So again, if you're not still learning, if you have nothing else to learn from a job, then leave. Find another job where you can learn more. And don't get comfortable. That's another point here. Don't get comfortable, don't kind of like settle into your comfort zone in a certain job just because it pays well. You could get a better paying job and you could learn more if you move, right? So all of your jobs are on a timer. Related to this, here's a quote, really like it. Michael Ellsberg, the only job security is your own ability to deliver results. So that's taught you about the other way around. Sometimes you'll be settled into a job, you're happy, and the job will get rid of you because you're too expensive or because the company is collapsing or whatever. And so realize that the only job security you'll ever have is your own ability to deliver results, because then you'll always be able to find a job. Is it dead yet? Okay. This is still on the topic of personal development, having interesting conversations. So when you're building friends, just try to find people who challenge the way you think and inspire you to think on a higher level. There are so many cool and interesting things to talk about in life, and this is still part of career building. You don't necessarily have to always be straight to the point. You can meet people, talk about something interesting, learn something, teach them something. All of these human interactions, that's a really important part of career development. And also, occasionally, although you should make friends with everyone, it's helpful to find people who are really high above your level and just have short conversations with them. So like the person I explained, the investment banker, that person is a very busy man. I was very lucky that we could have dinner with him. And in that time I was asking him about which books he's read, how he's developed his career, what he sees are the major problems, those kinds of things, because those higher people that have a lot of knowledge, and it's good to garner that from them. Okay, that's it. Here are just some other questions that were asked on Facebook. So I think this was Mohammed. Did you ask the first question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think I answered that question in the presentation? Yeah. Okay. The other question, what should I bring to the table? Resume, certificate. That was you as well. Yeah. Have I answered that?
Not really.
Okay. Right. So if you're starting an interaction with someone that you could work for, my suggestion is try to find a way to add value, right, off the bat. So of course it's important to write a resume and to pitch that resume to them, but if you can show them that you can add value to their organization, you make their choices much easier. The choice to hire you is much, much easier. Because like, hey, he's been doing something useful for us for free, even if it's just been a little thing. So that, again, goes back to the value hack. If you can find what's valuable to that organization, you can deliver a piece of that, then it's much more valuable than a resume or certificate or whatever. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Good. Are there any other questions? That's it for the presentation. Are there any other questions? No? Tea? Good. Thanks, guys. Thank you for your time.